To introduce one of my favorite entrepreneurs, author, and keynote speaker, Greg Larkin. Greg spoke at our Innovation Summit last month, and he inspired all of our attendees with his belief that inside every association, there's a dormant volcano of entrepreneurs waiting to be ignited. And so today, Greg will be bringing his experience, finding opportunities in a crisis, and show you how to use impact mapping so you can too. So Greg, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I just want to do a quick sound check. Kevin, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?
All good.
Wonderful. All right. This couldn't happen at a more important time. It's really an honor to be with you in a moment of crisis and in a moment of opportunity. If you're looking at this picture right now, you're looking at a picture of me during my college graduation 20 years ago. Soon after that, I moved back to New York and I became a community organizer with the New York Blood Center. Brooklyn at that time was a little bit different than it is now. It's a little bit more beat up. But during that first job, I was thrust into the epicenter of an incredible crisis. It was a beautiful Tuesday morning, and I was listening to the radio getting ready for a 10 a.m. meeting when a voice announced that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. I stepped out of my Brooklyn apartment where I was usually able to see the New York skyline, and I saw a second plane hit the second tower of the World Trade Center. Both my boss and my boss's boss at that moment were at a conference in South Africa. And so it fell to me to manage the blood supply for all of the survivors of the terrorist attacks on 9/11 who were streaming into hospitals and triage centers in Brooklyn. And it fell to me to coordinate all the blood drives in Brooklyn from people who wanted to help. That remains one of the hardest things that I've ever had to go through. It's some of the most intense pressure I have ever been under. And it was also one of the most rewarding and formative moments of my life. What I learned through that crisis was instrumental in helping me navigate a completely different crisis 7 years later when I was working in finance and had to navigate through the collapse of the housing market and had to navigate the collapse of Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns. The lessons that enabled me to navigate that crisis successfully were not learned in business school. They were learned in a 9/11 triage center. The reason I'm bringing that up is because all of us, if we are here right now on this webinar, we are being called upon to lead during a crisis. All of us are under an enormous amount of pressure. It is scary for everybody. And we will get through this. At some point, we're going to be on the other side of this. And what I want to do with our time today is to share some of the tools and resources that have enabled me to navigate a crisis. Because I think with those tools and with those principles, all of us can come out of this and look back on it as an incredibly valuable and formative inflection point for ourselves, for our communities, and for the organizations that we lead. The way I'm structuring this is I want to walk through some of the principles of crisis management, and I also want to share with you some of the tools that you can use to make those principles come to life, to implement them and to execute on them. There's basically 3 tiers of a crisis response, and people very often only do 2 of these things. The first tier is empathize. It's really important that you not try to pretend this is business as usual. It's important that you are empathetic to the people who you lead. It's important that you create a safe space for people to deal with what's undeniably a really hard time. As much pressure as we are all on to navigate an economic concern and to navigate the health crisis that we're dealing with, we also have to make time to just feel crummy and be strong for other people who feel crummy. And that's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. Stabilize. There are fires that we have to put out. There are urgent priorities that we have to fix. There are things that are undeniably broken that we have to stabilize right now. And visualize. That's the third pillar. We are going to come out on the other side of this. What's the future that we're going to build after this is in the rearview mirror? How can we learn from this? What opportunities to innovate exist now that aren't normally available to us? So I want to focus a little bit on empathize. This is an incredible moment that I saw a few days ago with Governor Cuomo in New York. Someone asked him in a press conference, how are you coping with the crisis? And he said, last night I spoke to my daughter for an hour and we had a conversation that we probably should have had 4 years ago. And it was such a, no one looked at him at that moment and was like, shouldn't you be focusing on getting hospitals and respirators up and running? And it was just sort of this incredible human connection that he expressed in the epicenter of an incredibly difficult situation. And I thought the humanity of that was such a demonstration of strength and empathy. And it reminded me of something that I shared with my team during the 2008 financial crisis. The opposite of weakness is vulnerability. When you are making time available to the community that you serve to say, I know this is a hard thing that you're going through and I'm here for you, people will remember that. It will get repaid. It's how you make deposits in the Karma bank account. And so there's sort of a very clean template that I kind of grapped with, that I put together here. And if you want to share in your console right now, you can. The emotions that our community is grappling with right now are blank. We can be of service by blank. Everyone, I would argue, needs to have has to have an answer to this question. How can you be of service to the people that are having a hard time in this crisis? It's important that you think about that and that you act on that right now. If anyone wants to take a minute to enter their answers to that question in the chat box, I think, whoops, excuse me, that would be great. Now would be a good time to do that. There we are. And Emily, if you want to unmute yourself, if any of those answers are coming through, and I can't quite see it right now. So if you want to unmute yourself and read them out, that would be great.
Certainly. One is grappling with chaos, and we can be of service by sharing tools.
Great.
Someone else said grappling with uncertainty.
Great. Great. Yeah. Chaos, uncertainty, anxiety. All of those are pretty real right now, I think, for everybody.
Yeah. We can be of service by being an anchor, by being clear and specific. Grappling
Great.
with anxiety, service by listening is another answer.
Mm-hmm.
Service by tools.
Mm-hmm.
Service by leading with confidence. Grappling with loss of control, and we can be of service by providing community.
Great. So all of these are exactly right, and I hear some themes coming across right out of the gate, which is enabling to your community to help one another and listening to them and creating an outlet for them to share what's hard for them right now. And there's another piece of this, stabilize. So be radically candid about the jobs to be done. In a time of crisis, it's not only an emotional heavy lift, it's also an opportunity to be very clear about what is the damage and how does it get fixed? What has to be fixed? If you're running out of supplies, if there's economic uncertainty, be clear about what that is. Be quantitative if you can about what that is. If you need the data to make a quantitative assessment, ask for it. Be clear about what that data is. People aren't going to be freaked out about it. They would appreciate the fact that you're creating a concrete picture of what has to get fixed when everything is back up and running. And so there's another template you can use to think about that. An urgent problem our community is facing in this crisis is blank, and we can help by blank. So if you want to take a minute to fill in those two blanks, that would be great. I think some ideas will be shared across other organizations who are on the call. And Emily, please read them out again.
Sure. While people are typing those out, there's one that was shared from the last one that I thought is kind of important. So our members are nurses. They're dealing with significant uncertainty, fear due to the lack of PPE. So we can be of service through education, advocacy, and tangible support in other areas of their lives. So an example is that they're partnering with food delivery.
Great.
Another one right now, lack of supplies for this. An urgent problem our community is facing in this crisis is lack of supplies. So we can help by providing supplies. Mobilizing resources.
Great, great. So mobilizing resources, supply shortages.
Loss of revenue is one. We can help by being a voice for the industry to those in the government.
Awesome, awesome. So leveraging your relationships with regulators and legislators to provide resources that people need and don't have. Great.
Another urgent problem, understanding how technology can be harnessed to continue doing work in new ways. We can help by providing resources for education and networking around best practices. Another crisis, first responder burnout and anxiety. We can help by providing support.
Great.
Good ones.
Burnout. That's interesting. You know, it's funny when you think about that. It's like burnout is as much a problem as much monitoring burnout and responding to it as much a stabilized goal as it is a empathized goal. But it's true. Some of these things are going to overlap. So let's keep going. Something I wanted to point out. This came up in 24 hours, and it is all of the different startups that are creating solutions to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. And it also shares exactly where those startups are playing. So whether it's testing, telemedicine, screening, triage, it's kind of amazing. And it's a mix of both huge companies as well as early stage startups or kind of mid-tier startups. I've been engaged in startup health kind of consortium. And through that consortium, we're getting incredible feedback. We're seeing things where startups who have had dormant or extremely complicated partnerships with hospitals in 8 hours are getting joint ventures pieced together and passed by regulators. I bring that up because in a time like now, this is really an amazing opportunity to sort of plant a flag into the future of how this industry needs to work. Every crisis is. This is a company which normally provides testing for STDs and has completely redone their entire supply chain to be a COVID-19 home testing kit. The FDA, correctly in my view, has said we need to make sure this is legit before you start rolling it out. But it's just a sign of the ingenuity that's happening and how there's just incredible innovation, and there's a window that opens up in a crisis like this to sort of restructure how the industry works. And so you have to create the future in a crisis like this. What is the future that we need and don't have? If you look at 9/11, that spurred the Department of Homeland Security. If you think of the financial crisis, the blockchain was invented as a direct response to the 2008 financial crisis. In any crisis like this, it's incredibly evident what the cost of not innovating is. And it's an opportunity for startups and for innovative enterprises to make an enormous amount of progress in recreating what the industry needs to look like. I will even take that a step further. Once the dust settles of this crisis, there's going to be a few things that happen. There are going to be congressional hearings and regulations to say, how did this happen and how can we prevent it from ever happening again? That's going to be partisan, probably. It's going to have a lot of infighting. That's not really where the change happens. That's where the fingers get pointed, but it's not where the change happens. The change is going to happen from startups and innovators. One of these startups that you're looking at on this page is going to be the next Google, is going to be the next Amazon, the next Facebook. They're going to do something that makes it very difficult for the incumbents in the healthcare industry to stay in business. And that kind of disruption is being seeded right now. And so when you think about visualize as a crisis goal, think about it in these terms. After this crisis, we can become more resilient by X. And we can start now by doing what? That has to be a goal that you're focused on at this stage in the crisis. That's a key component to crisis management. It's sort of planting a flag in the future of your own industry. And so I'd love to see what kind of answers you guys have to this question. And Emily, if you want to take the lead in reading them out, that'd be great.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Go ahead and share your answers in the chat and I will read them out.
I also need to put a big asterisk. Both of my kids obviously are running around my house right now. So there is a slight probability that a 12-year-old boy or a 10-year-old girl will wander in and start making noise. Sorry if that interrupts our flow, but it's just a fact of life right now.
All right. So after this crisis, we can become more resilient by diversifying revenue streams. We can start now by exploring opportunities. After this crisis, we can become more resilient by building better response protocols and capacities. Mm-hmm. After this crisis, we can become more resilient by practicing gratitude. We can start now by practicing gratitude. After this crisis, we can become more resilient by working together. We can start now by being creative and innovative.
Great.
Become more resilient by knowing the importance of our industry on the economy. We can start now by educating the public on what our industry touches in the lives of everyday citizens. What a great one.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. So these are some of the values, right? And I think it's so important to make sure that you are creating goals and making these goals, the empathize, stabilize, visualize. It's really important that you get to a goal that aligns your entire organization and enables your entire organization to build greater alignment with the community that you're part of. If you're taking the lead on being of service to your community by making these goals come to life, it's going to come back and serve you very positively in the future. It's sort of an investment. And there are a bunch of tools that we can use to make this come to life. And I want to share one of the most critical ones, impact mapping. Impact mapping is a tool that in the innovation space and in the entrepreneur space, I have relied on throughout my life. It's probably one of the lesser known of the tools in the entrepreneur toolbox. People know a lot more about agile and design thinking and Scrum than they do about impact mapping, which has served me well because I swear by it, and very few people, it makes me seem like I'm the smartest guy in the room. So anyway, I'm sharing my top secret right now. So here's how impact mapping works. The first step in an impact map is to identify your goal. We already established that. The goal should be one that you need to achieve. It should be measurable, and it should be time-bound. The second step is to identify the people who are critical for achieving that goal. And those people should be internal and external. Who is part of your organization, and who are you dependent on outside of your organization for achieving that goal? The third component of an impact map is impacts. These are not outputs, these are outcomes. In other words, these people are going to have the following outcomes in order to achieve that goal. And then finally, we get to deliverables. What are these people going to build to create the impact to achieve the goal? That's the 4 pillars of an impact map. It's not very complicated. It's a super simple tool that can be used. And I created an example that I think will make it come to life in a pretty clear way. So we said a goal. When we're dealing in a crisis, make sure you're focused on a wartime goal and not a peacetime goal. In other words, a peacetime goal might be, we want to ensure that this year's conference revenue is up 15%. We're not in peacetime right now. And so you have to take some of the goals that we've identified in the first section. It can be the empathize goal, stabilize goal, visualize goal. You want to take all of them and build an impact map for each of them. Some of you who were at the conference in Chicago about a month ago will remember that I have a big brother who's much smarter than me. My brother was really into punk music when we were growing up, and now he is the director of maternal medicine for the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And this crisis is very real for him. And I went through an impact map and did it with him the other day. I want to share what that looks like. So his stabilized goal was an urgent problem maternity wards face in this crisis is equipment shortages. We can help by creating a nationwide equipment exchange between hospitals. So different hospitals are going to have different birth rates. Different communities are going to have different birth rates. And so there might be some hospitals that have a surplus of equipment and other hospitals that have a shortage of equipment. And if there was a system for those who need equipment and don't have it to quickly identify a hospital that does have it and can share it, that would solve some of the equipment shortages. So who are some of the people to make this goal come to life? So there's a way to think about the people. So the people who need this are, now we're not thinking of everyone who's about to give birth in a community. We want to think of a person that can act as the voice of the affected population. So who is the best representative of the people who need this? If you were in Chicago, or have read any of my books, you will hear that I speak all the time about the need for punks and pinstripes. And in a crisis, it is no different. The punks who can build this fast are. This is the opportunity for the entrepreneurs, the creatives, the designers, the engineers, people that don't necessarily take the lead in these situations. It's really important right now that you tap them to build something very, very fast and very effective. And the pinstripes who can provide air cover are. These are the people that can reach out to regulators, reach across to other hospitals, who have the ability to speak one executive to the next and get things moving very quickly. So the people who need this are, give me 1 second, please. Sorry about that. Having some screenshot issues. So the people who need this, so we can decide that department directors are going to be the people who can serve as the voice of the patient in this crisis. The punks who can build this are going to be e-commerce engineers, someone who can build out a platform for multiple organizations to digitally share who has surplus and who has shortages. Member outreach, someone who can build a platform for the members of different hospital networks to communicate with one another and share emergencies. And the pinstripes, so you might need someone who can smooth the way with regulators, and also someone who can reach out to big tech companies and build relationships with them, get technology donated, get engineers donated. So that's the goal. Those are the people. And then we kind of move on to the impacts. So the impacts are, how will you know that these people are achieving their goal? That's sort of like a KPI. So we will know that if that the department heads of different maternity wards in different hospitals are achieving their goal when equipment shortages are resolved 20% faster. When there's a platform launched to match supply and demand. When every member who's been part of this, who is reached out to, is engaged, 80% of those members are engaging with the platform every day. And when we know that regulators, that the board member will have effectively engaged with regulators when regulatory approvals are completed in less than 3 days. Board members who can get tech secondments. There we go. So if Amazon Web Services donates to engineers and provides free cloud storage. So you can kind of see how this is starting to play out. Now you have the people, you have the things that you're looking for them to build in order to achieve the goal. And then you're looking at deliverables. So I'm not going to read all of these deliverables out, you can see it, but essentially these are the things that these people are going to build to achieve those outcomes, to achieve the goal. Right? So this becomes, that delivery, those deliverables, those become your action items. These are the things that people, the people you've identified are going to own. It's going to be their responsibility to act on this in real time. When you have those deliverables, you don't want to just leave them on a whiteboard somewhere or on a Post-it note somewhere. I use Trello. You want to use a workflow management tool, and this is really what it should look like. Every one of the things that are in the inbox are those deliverables. And on a day-to-day basis, you want to be moving it from this is something to do, doing, ready for testing, done. And it's validated because it's worked, or it's invalidated because it didn't work. Again, I use Trello as that tool. Different people use different services. But this is just a really quick board that I put together. This is really a virtual war room. So one of the things that I heard in the comments was communication. This board can be shared across multiple different stakeholders. It can be in your organization, but it can also be shared with your community. Also, if you have a phone on you, I have made this board public. So if you scan this QR code with your phone, you can have access to this board. You can replicate it for yourselves. It's an extremely easy platform to use. So I just want to reiterate, I focused only on this impact map on a stabilization goal. It's really important that to not neglect empathy and visualizing the future. You should have a goal for all three. And some of the action items and people will overlap, especially in a smaller organization. But it's really important that you go through this exercise for all three of these goals. To do otherwise means that you have a very unbalanced response to a crisis. I didn't invent impact mapping, I just use it. There is I think it's a 30-page book. It's extremely short and easily accessible. So there's a book called Impact Mapping. Some other tools. During a crisis, you do want to have a daily stand-up. Here's what a daily stand-up looks like. Every morning, everyone who's part of the crisis response team should ask 4 questions. Stand in a circle and you ask 4 questions. Number 1, is anyone bringing anything to work today? When you say, is anyone bringing anything to work today, what you're essentially saying is like, is someone in your family sick? Are your kids driving you crazy? Has your ex-wife moved into your house, or your ex-husband moved into your house because they have to quarantine? Whatever that is, this is a time of emotional heaviness. And you just want to make sure that everyone on your team knows that it's a safe space to bring that up. We're not going to assume that everyone comes to work and compartmentalizes a hard time. And so when you talk about the empathy, just putting that out there, most of the time people won't have a response to that, but you want to make sure that people know that they can. And then we start focusing on the stabilize and the visualize goals. What did you work on yesterday? What are you working on today? And are there any blockers? The blockers are extremely important. What are some of the challenges that are preventing you from moving forward in the way that you hope? And how can that you need us to help you get over? How can we overcome those obstacles? And it's important to do that every day. And you might want to open that up to members of your community. So here's how to, just pulling it all together. Number 1, set a crisis goal. Empathize, stabilize, visualize. 2, build those goals into an impact map. And I would argue that you should use Trello as the tool to create a war room around them. And then 3, run daily sprints. Make sure that you are communicating every day about how you are sprinting towards those goals. Use the daily stand-up. When you kind of see it in just those 3 steps, it's not extremely complicated, but it has such an incredible power in terms of providing a source of stability and transparency and giving people a certain degree of certainty about what you're working on and how you're going to get through this crisis. So there's a couple things that you can do. Number 1, you can scan that QR code that you're looking at right now. Just take a photo of it with your phone. That will enable you to connect with me on LinkedIn. 2, okay, before you scan this, I need to be clear. Yeah, I'm wired in a very particular way, and it's really important for me to be of service. Going through a crisis for me is just an opportunity for me to help. I've said it at the beginning, it's some of the most important times in my career, and the biggest inflection points of my career were in reaction to a crisis, and this is no different. So If you scan this QR code, that will enable you to get a 30-minute meeting with me. If you need more time, we can set up more time. There's another thing I'll announce now. I am waiving my consulting fee for this group. You can pay me whatever you want, and if that's zero, then it's zero. I have total confidence that by doing the right thing and being of service to a community that needs me, I'd rather add value to the Karma bank account than my actual bank account right now. So if you need me, and if you're navigating a crisis like this for the first time, please call on me. I am here to help. I'm not doing this from, I'm thinking about how to make this go away as fast as possible and to be a premise for growth. And I just want to just get back to where we began. This is a great quote from Muhammad Ali. The service that we render unto others is the rent we pay for our time here on earth. We've all been called on to serve at a moment of incredible hardship, difficulty, and it's a privilege. It's very hard. I'm not trying to negate in any way how hard this can be. But I do want to just emphasize that, there we are, hi. This is one of those moments where you want to make some of those rent payments. It's incredibly powerful to be able to serve as a leader in a time of crisis. And if you are a leader and this is that crisis, it's hard and it's incredibly valuable. There's no, this is probably one of those moments where you can be of service to others in a way that you can't otherwise be. So thank you very much. I hope that I can help you beyond this webinar. And more than anything, I hope we can have a conversation and I can help you directly if there are any questions.
Great. Well, thanks, Greg. Thank you for that generous offer. So there was a couple of questions coming in, and we do have some time for that. So who would you recommend including in the impact mapping sessions?
Yeah. It really varies. I think you should begin by, so you're going to have people that you work with on a day-to-day basis. You know who those people are. And the group should not be more than like 3 or 4 people to start. But when you go through that first exercise and you identify what are your goals and what are your people, whoever those people are, you need a representative for each of those groups that you pull into the people of your impact map. That becomes your sort of core crew. What I would also suggest is don't break the 2-pizza rule. If you have so many people that you cannot manage the number of deliverables and the number of outcomes and all of the competing requests, it can really get hairy. So I just to reiterate, like, big enough so that you can achieve the goal and have the intelligence that you need, but small enough so that you can get to work and move as fast as you have to.
Great, thank you. So again, we still have just a few more minutes for some Q&A. Use the chat and or the Q&A box.
So one of the things that, one of the things that's pretty remarkable right now is, I'll say this. If you're hearing this and you don't have a direct lifeline to some of the startups that are part of your industry's ecosystem, now is a really good time if you're interested in innovating and bringing those people into this network. It's really, there are tons of startups that are working in this space that are looking for partnerships. This is their runway. This is their launch pad to sort of make an impact on the industry. So just getting back to your question, the question that you the question that you raised in terms of people is, it's also a good time when I said include the punks and the pinstripes. Some of the punks might be people you've never spoken to before, but are ready and able and willing to help and collaborate in a way that is pretty eye-popping.
Great. We have another question coming in. How do you balance timelines of goals? Should some be long-term and short-term, or should all be geared to be completed fast, and how fast?
Yeah, good question. So it should be a mix of both, but you should, and if you have a long-term goal, you still should keep breaking that long-term goal down into its bite-sized components so that, so for example, if you're going to create, like the example I shared with, about an opportunity for sharing resources across maternity wards and hospitals, that's building an exchange for the hospitals who have surplus and the hospitals that don't is a very long-term thing. Like, that's only going to get better over time, but you can build a very small version of that just using Google Sheets, right? And or an Excel spreadsheet where you have names of hospitals and you have critical equipment that's critical for this crisis, and you know who has it and who doesn't, and you just start matching them together manually. You could have that up and running in a few hours, and that's just working the phones and using your network. And so you have to be very ambitious, but you also have to have the ability to get it out and make it useful and make it accessible right out of the gate. The other thing I would, so if it takes more than 2 weeks to get a prototype up and running, maybe you haven't figured out what your MVP is. What's your minimum viable product? What's the smallest thing, quickest thing you can build in order to solve the problem for the people who need you and don't have it?
Great. Another question is, how does impact mapping improve over other techniques, or improve over other techniques?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so this is my own point of view on it. The reason I think an impact map is really valuable is that it's much more focused on alignment. So you have some parts of an organization that have a very high level strategy perspective over why are we here, what are we building, where are we supposed to be in a year from now? And then you have the implementation and the delivery sort of level of a company, which is focused on what are we building every day? And sometimes they are not synchronized. Oftentimes they're not synchronized. You have the strategy team and the delivery team totally misaligned. And I've seen that happen in a lot of agile organizations as well, where you have really good innovation and software and technology teams that build stuff that no one needs, that has no ROI, but they do it very quickly. And so the value of an impact map is that it ensures that the executive strategic goals of an organization are aligned with the things that are getting built on the ground every day, every week, every sprint, every quarter. So I think it just enables alignment. It enables alignment at all times, but I think the other value of an impact map is in a crisis scenario, it's such an easy tool. And in my view, much easier, for example, than like the business model canvas. Some people might have seen that who are on the call. Business model canvas doesn't necessarily lend itself to deliverables. It's hard to translate the things that you articulate in a business model canvas to the stuff we're going to build right now. And when you use an impact map, there's a direct link between why we're here, what does success look like, how we're going to achieve that success, and what are we building right now to make that success come to life. It's one single flow through from strategy to execution. You're not having to start all over again when you get to the implementation stage of it. That's why I've come to rely on it over other tools. The other thing about it is if you go through a 2-week sprint and you didn't achieve the outcomes you hoped to, it's such a simple framework that you can fix it. You can revisit your impact map and iterate and make it better. It's not something where it's set in stone the minute you get started. And very often that first or second week of a big project and a big crisis, you're probably going to make a bunch of mistakes. And if you have a tool that's so cumbersome to get off the ground that you can't go back and tweak it as you learn, it sort of stops being of value. So I think an impact map gets over that problem.
Great. So some of us on this call are also familiar with and have done exercises with design thinking and the all-important feedback loop. Is there such a concept with the impact mapping about iterating and feedback into what you've learned?
Help me understand that question a bit better. Feedback loop into what I've learned as a strategist and as an entrepreneur.
Well, more specifically on some of the design thinking models, there's that you get that feedback and you constantly are iterating based on feedback.
Oh, I see.
Is there such a concept here with the impact map?
Yeah, 100%. That kind of build, measure, learn cycle. If you saw what I showed in the Trello board, I don't know if you saw it, but there's 2 columns at the end. So you're taking those deliverables and you go from it's to do, doing, done. Well, there's 2 done columns. One of them is validated and the other is done but invalidated, right? Meaning there might be things that you built because you thought it was going to achieve the outcome. And when you actually built it, it was invalidated as being aligned with your goal. And does that mean that your goal is a lot more ambitious than you thought? Maybe. Does it mean that it's the wrong deliverable for the impact map? Maybe. But the purpose of the impact map is that you can go back to it and very clearly see where there is a flaw in the connection between goals, people, impacts, and deliverables. You can go back to the thing you built and say, all right, where is the disconnect here? Was that an outcome that doesn't actually support our highest level goal? Did we have the wrong person involved in it? Was it the wrong deliverable? It enables you to be much more precise about where there is a disconnect between the things you built and the outcomes you sought to achieve.